The flight attendant's hand came down like a whip across a 12-year-old boy's face. First class, seat 1A. A child reading a book. She didn't ask his name. She didn't check his ticket. She saw a black boy in a seat she decided he didn't deserve, and she hit him. Full palm, full force. The crack split the cabin silent. 41 adults watched. 41 adults did nothing. She grabbed his collar and snarled, "Get out, or I'll have you dragged out in handcuffs." The boy's cheek was already swelling. Blood rushed under his skin, but his eyes were dry and his voice was steel. "My father will handle this." She laughed. The whole cabin laughed. They had no idea his father owned the airline. If this story hits you the way it hit me, subscribe to this channel right now and stay with me to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches across the world. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Elijah Carter was 12 years old, and he had never flown alone. His grandmother Ruth drove him to LAX that Thursday morning with the radio off because Ruth didn't believe in noise before noon. Ruth cut her eyes at him, but the corner of her mouth turned up. She was 71. Raised 3 kids, buried a husband, survived a stroke, still woke up at 5 to pray every single morning. She didn't worry about much anymore, but sending her grandson across the country alone put a knot in her chest she couldn't quite pray away. She parked the car, walked him to the counter, watched the agent scan his boarding pass, and heard the words with her own ears. "First class, seat 1A. You're all set, sweetheart." Ruth straightened Elijah's collar one last time. She held his face with both hands. "Don't let anybody make you feel small. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Call me when you land." She watched him walk through security. She stood there until he disappeared. And she went home to wait. She had no idea what was coming. Elijah found his seat, put his bag overhead, buckled in, and opened the book his father had given him. James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. He'd read the first chapter twice already and still didn't fully understand it. But his father said that was the point. Read it again every year. It'll mean something different every time. The cabin filled up around him. Suits, laptops, a couple holding hands. A woman in a fur collar who looked at him, looked away, and looked at him again. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody offered him water. Nobody handed him a menu. Every other first-class passenger had already been greeted by name. Elijah didn't notice. He was reading. Then she walked through the curtain. Karen Mellick, 43, 14 years with the airline, recently divorced, recently transferred to first class after filing a scheduling complaint that made her unpopular with 3 different crew managers. She was efficient. She was sharp. And she had a habit that 2 former colleagues had already reported to HR, and nothing had come of it. She decided who belonged in her cabin before she checked a single ticket. She saw Elijah and stopped walking, a 12-year-old black boy in 1A. She didn't check his boarding pass. She walked right past him to the galley, where a younger attendant named David Park was stacking napkins. "Who's the kid in 1A?" David looked up. "Which kid?" "The one sitting in first class, alone." "You didn't notice?" "I figured someone booked him the seat." "Or he wandered up from coach. It happens, David." "Did you check his pass?" Karen folded her arms. "I don't need to check his pass. I can tell when someone doesn't belong." David stopped stacking. He looked at her for a long moment. "Karen, check his ticket." She didn't answer. She picked up a clipboard, walked back to row 1, and stood over Elijah like she was about to write him a citation. "Excuse me, this is first class." Elijah looked up. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have a ticket for this seat?" "Yes, ma'am, 1A." "Show me." He reached into his pocket and held out the boarding pass. She took it from his hand, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, and then she folded it and slid it into her blazer pocket, right in front of him. "This isn't valid." "Ma'am, I said it's not valid. You need to come with me." Elijah's stomach dropped. He had watched his grandmother triple-check that ticket at the kitchen table. She had expected the kind of instant compliance that came from a child who thought adults were always right. Instead, she got a boy who knew he hadn't done anything wrong and said so. "Stand up. Now." "Ma'am, can you call a supervisor? I think there's been a misunderstanding." She grabbed his arm. Not gently, not the way you guide a child through a doorway. She grabbed him the way you grab something you're throwing away. Her fingers dug into his bicep and she yanked. Elijah pulled back. Reflex. Instinct. The same way any person on earth pulls away when a stranger grabs their body without permission. Karen Melick raised her right hand and brought it across his face. The slap landed on his left cheek. The sound was so sharp that a man in row 4 who had been sleeping jerked awake. The woman in the fur collar gasped and then covered her mouth. David Park was standing 6 feet away in the galley entrance. He saw the whole thing. His hand went to his radio and then stopped. He didn't call it in. He didn't move. 41 passengers, 41 adults. Not one of them said a word. Elijah's head snapped to the right. His cheek burned. His eyes filled, but nothing fell. He blinked once, twice, 3 times. Then he turned back to face her. He didn't scream. He didn't swing. He didn't collapse. "My father will handle this." Karen laughed. She actually laughed. And then she turned to the cabin, raised her voice and said, "We have an unaccompanied minor who's become aggressive. I need security to the forward cabin immediately." Aggressive. That word did something to the air in that cabin. 1 second Elijah was a child, the next he was a threat. Because a woman in a uniform said so, and nobody questioned it. That word was a weapon, and Karen Melick knew exactly how to use it. Security came in 4 minutes. 2 officers, Victor Ruiz and Diane Kowalski. Victor was calm. He scanned the cabin. He saw a boy in 1A with a red mark spreading across his left cheek and a flight attendant standing over him with her arms crossed. What happened here? Karen didn't hesitate. Unauthorized passenger. Became combative when I asked for his ticket. I need him off this aircraft. Victor looked at Elijah. The boy was still sitting down, seatbelt buckled, book open on his lap, hands visible. He looked like a kid who had just been hit and was trying very hard not to fall apart. "Son, can you come with us?" "Sir, I have a ticket. She took it. She put it in her left pocket." Victor looked at Karen. "Ma'am, do you have his boarding pass?" Karen paused. 1 second. 2 seconds. "He didn't have one. She's lying." Row 3. A man's voice. Gerald Hammond, 67 years old, retired high school principal from Pasadena, 38 years in public education. He had watched the entire thing from start to finish. "I watched her take that boy's boarding pass and put it in her pocket. I'm sitting right here. I saw the whole thing." Karen turned on him fast. "Sir, I need you to remain seated and—" "I am seated, and I'm telling the truth. That woman struck that child." The cabin crackled with tension. For 1 second, it felt like something might shift, like maybe the truth would hold, like maybe one honest voice could change the direction of this whole thing. But Victor Ruiz made a decision. Not a brave decision, a convenient one. "Son, let's sort this out off the aircraft. Grab your things and come with me." Elijah unbuckled his belt, closed his book, stood up, pulled his bag from the overhead bin. He walked past Karen Melick without looking at her, but the cockpit mic, the one nobody thought about, picked up what he said as he passed. "You made a mistake." She smiled. She thought it was over. They brought him downstairs, Terminal 4, lower level, a windowless room with a metal table, 3 plastic chairs, a security camera in the corner that was conveniently out of service, and a fluorescent light that hummed so loud it felt like it was inside his skull. Victor sat across from him. Diane stood by the door. "Tell me what happened, son." Elijah told him. Every word. The seat, the ticket, the grab, the slap. He told it clean and straight because his father had taught him that truth doesn't need decoration. "She slapped you?" "Yes, sir. Left side." Victor looked at Elijah's cheek. The mark was darkening. He looked at Diane. Diane looked at the dead camera and said nothing. "Sit tight. We're going to look into this." They walked out, the door shut. Elijah tried his phone. No signal. Not weak signal. 0. Dead. He toggled airplane mode on and off, moved to every corner of that room, held the phone up to the ceiling. Nothing. The room was a tomb. 20 minutes passed. 30. 40. Nobody came back. What Elijah didn't know was that upstairs, the machine was already moving. The call went to Stephen Aldrich, Regional Director of Customer Relations, 56 years old, 30 years with the airline. He had survived 4 CEO changes, 2 corporate mergers, and a federal discrimination lawsuit in 2011 that cost the company $47 million. Stephen Aldrich didn't care about truth. He cared about containment. First-class removal, juvenile, physical contact by a crew member, the voice on the phone told him. Aldrich didn't ask what happened. He asked, "Is there video?" "Probably." "Get ahead of it. Build the file. Unauthorized, hostile, self-defense. I want documentation on my desk in 20 minutes. And just like that, the airline's version started writing itself. Before anyone reviewed the footage, before anyone checked the booking system, before anyone asked Elijah a single honest question, the story was already set. The boy was the problem. The attendant was the victim, and the system would hold. They had done this before. Meanwhile, Karen Mellick was 30,000 feet in the air, pouring champagne for the man who took Elijah's seat after he was dragged away. She hadn't been questioned. She hadn't been suspended. She hadn't been asked to hand over the boarding pass, still sitting in her blazer pocket. But Gerald Hammond was not finished. Before the cabin door closed, Gerald had pulled out his phone and recorded 15 seconds. No narration, just the aftermath. Karen walking away, Elijah's empty seat. The silence of 40 people who watched a child get struck and didn't lift a finger. He texted the video to his daughter Angela with 3 words, "Watch this, now." Angela Hammond was an investigative journalist in Washington, D.C. She had broken stories about police misconduct, housing discrimination, and federal contractor fraud. She knew what she was looking at the moment she pressed play. She called her father back in 45 seconds. "Dad, who is this boy? I don't know his name, but I know what I saw." She hit him, Angela. Open hand, full force. "He's a child." "Where is he now?" "They took him off the plane. I don't know where." "Don't delete that video. Don't send it to anyone else. I'm making calls." She hung up. Gerald sat back in his seat. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from fury. Back in that basement room, the door opened again. A woman in a navy suit walked in. She didn't smile with her eyes. She smiled the way people smile when they're about to ask you to give something up and they want you to think it's your idea. "Hi, Elijah. I'm Patricia Hayward, Guest Services. I'm here to help sort this out." She sat down, opened a manila folder, clicked her pen. "Can you tell me why you were in the first-class cabin?" "Because that's my seat." "And who purchased the ticket?" "My grandmother." "And where are your parents right now?" "My dad is in New York. He's meeting me at JFK. Patricia wrote something down without looking up. "Elijah, has anyone ever explained to you that it's wrong to go into places where you don't belong?" The pen in his bag was still recording. "I didn't go anywhere I don't belong. I had a ticket." "Well, our system shows the seat was unoccupied." "That's not true. I was sitting in it." "I understand you feel that way, but systems don't lie, sweetheart. There may have been a glitch. What I'd like to do is rebook you in economy on a later flight, and we'll contact your family from here." "I want to call my dad." "We'll get to that, but first I need you to sign this." She pushed a single piece of paper across the table. Elijah looked at it. The language was dense, legal, and clearly not written for a 12-year-old to understand. But he recognized one phrase at the bottom of the page, because his father had pointed it out to him once on a completely different document and said, "If you ever see these words, don't sign. Don't touch the paper. Don't even pick up the pen. Waiver of liability." They were asking a child to sign away his right to hold them accountable. Elijah pushed the paper back. "I'm not signing anything." Patricia's smile stayed exactly the same, but her voice dropped half an octave. "Elijah, if you're unable to cooperate, we may have to contact Child Protective Services. An unaccompanied minor without proper documentation raises serious welfare concerns." "I have documentation. Your flight attendant stole my boarding pass. Check your own system. It'll show I was booked in 1A. "Our system shows the seat was unassigned." "Then somebody changed it." Patricia closed the folder. She stood up. She looked at him the way you look at something you're about to bury. "I'll be back." The door shut, and for the first time in his life, Elijah Carter felt the weight of something his father had tried to explain to him, but that no explanation can truly prepare you for. The feeling of being right and being powerless at the same time. The feeling of telling the truth to people who have already decided it doesn't matter. His hand found the side pocket of his bag. His fingers touched paper. His grandmother's note. He opened it. "Baby, the world will try to put you in rooms you didn't choose, but God already chose the door out. Stand still, be brave, and remember your name. Elijah, the prophet who stood alone and still won." He folded it, put it back, sat up straight. He didn't know that Gerald Hammond's video was already in the hands of a journalist who was making phone calls that would set the next 48 hours on fire. He didn't know that the airline had already altered the booking record for Seat 1A, scrubbed his name, marked it vacant, and created a paper trail that pointed nowhere. He didn't know that Karen Mellick, somewhere over Nevada at 36,000 feet, had texted a colleague 4 words that would later be read aloud in a federal hearing. Handled the kid. Done. But here is what Elijah did know. 6 months ago, his father sat him down at the kitchen table and pushed a small black device across the surface. It looked like a pen. It was not a pen. "If you're ever in real trouble," Jeremiah had said, "not a bad grade, not a schoolyard fight, real trouble. Someone bigger than you trying to hurt you or take something from you. I want you to do 3 things. Stay calm. Panic makes you invisible. Remember everything. Names, times, words, faces. Your memory is a weapon. And third, press the button on top of this. 1 click, it starts recording. Audio. Uploads to an encrypted server every 60 seconds. No one can delete it. Even if they take it from you, the file is already gone." Elijah had never pressed that button before, but the moment Karen Mellick's hand closed around his arm, before she even raised her palm, before the slap, before the lie, before any of it, his fingers found the pen in his bag and clicked it once. From that moment on, every word spoken in Elijah Carter's presence was recorded, encrypted, and transmitted to a secure server 3,000 miles away. Every lie Karen told, every question Patricia asked, every instruction Stephen Aldrich gave over the phone, all of it, captured, time-stamped, preserved beyond anyone's reach. They thought they were dealing with a scared child alone in a room with no signal and no witnesses. They had no idea that the scared child was the witness, and the evidence was already out of their hands. 3,000 miles east, Jeremiah Carter's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out. One notification from a system he had prayed his son would never need to use. Alert. Device activated. Live audio stream. Duration, 47 minutes and counting. Jeremiah pressed play. He heard his son's voice, calm, steady, telling the truth to people who refused to hear it. Then he heard a woman's voice say, "Has anyone ever explained to you that it's wrong to go into places where you don't belong?" Jeremiah Carter closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the phone so hard the case cracked. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He picked up the hotel room phone and dialed a number from memory. "Raymond, it's Jeremiah. I need you on a plane to Los Angeles tonight. Bring the full team. Bring everything." "What happened?" "They put their hands on my son." Silence on the other end. Then, "We'll be wheels up in 90 minutes. Jeremiah hung up. He stood at the window of his hotel room, looking out at Manhattan. His reflection stared back. And behind his reflection, the audio kept playing. His boy's voice, steady, unbroken, still telling the truth to a room full of liars. Elijah didn't know any of this. He was still sitting in that windowless room, still waiting, still alone. But he wasn't alone. He was never alone. And in the next few hours, every single person who touched this, Karen Mellick, Stephen Aldrich, Patricia Hayward, and every executive who thought they could bury a 12-year-old boy's truth under paperwork and silence, was going to find out exactly who they were dealing with. Not just a boy, not just a father. A reckoning. Raymond Voss had been Jeremiah Carter's attorney for 11 years. He had handled corporate acquisitions worth billions, shareholder disputes that made front-page news, and one wrongful death case that took 4 years and nearly broke him. He was 61 years old, built like a man who had played football in college and never fully stopped training. And he had a voice that could fill a courtroom without ever rising above conversation level. When Jeremiah called, Raymond was eating dinner with his wife in Georgetown. He put down his fork, listened for 90 seconds, and stood up from the table. "How bad?" his wife asked. "Bad enough that I'm not finishing this steak." He kissed her on the forehead and was out the door in 3 minutes. By the time his car reached the private airstrip in Manassas, 2 associates were already on board, a litigation specialist named Denise Faulkner and a digital forensics expert named Marcus Webb. Raymond had called them both from the car. He told them the same thing. A flight attendant assaulted Jeremiah's son on a commercial aircraft. The airline is covering it up in real time. We have live audio. We need to be in Los Angeles before sunrise. Denise asked one question: "Is the boy safe?" "He's in a security office at LAX, alone, no phone signal. They're trying to get him to sign a liability waiver." "He's 12. "I know. They can't do that." "They're doing it." The plane was in the air by 9:47 p.m. Eastern. At the same time, 3,000 miles west, Patricia Hayward walked back into the security office at Terminal 4. She had been gone for 35 minutes. Elijah was exactly where she left him, sitting straight, hands on the table, eyes forward. She sat down and opened her folder again. This time her voice was softer, almost kind, the sort of kindness that comes with a price tag. "Elijah, I spoke with my team. We've looked into the situation, and I have good news." Elijah said nothing. "We're going to get you on a flight tonight, economy class. We'll waive the rebooking fee, and we'll make sure someone meets you at JFK." "What about my original ticket?" "Unfortunately, there was a system error with your booking. These things happen more often than you'd think. The important thing is we get you where you need to go." "There was no system error. I had seat 1A. Your flight attendant took my pass and lied about it." Patricia tilted her head like she was dealing with a child who didn't understand how the world worked, which, in her mind, she was. "Elijah, I understand this is frustrating, but our staff followed standard protocol. If there was a miscommunication, I apologize. Now, if you'll just sign..." "I already told you, I'm not signing anything." Patricia's jaw tightened. She closed the folder again, slower this time. "Then we need to discuss next steps. Because an unaccompanied minor without a valid booking is a child welfare matter. I've already contacted the relevant authorities." She let that sentence sit in the air. She wanted it to scare him. She wanted the idea of authorities to do what the slap hadn't. Break him down, make him compliant, make him agree to whatever they put in front of him just to make it stop. Elijah felt it, the fear. It crawled up from his stomach and wrapped around his chest. He was 12. He was alone. He was in a room with no windows and no signal, and a woman who had just threatened him with child protective services. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to give in. But then he heard his father's voice in his head. Not the recording, the memory. "Panic makes you invisible." Elijah took a breath. "Ma'am, I know my rights. You can't hold a minor in a room without contacting a parent or legal guardian first. You haven't called my father. You haven't called my grandmother. You haven't let me make a single phone call. Whatever you're doing right now, it's not protocol. It's pressure." Patricia blinked. For the first time, she didn't have a ready answer. "And one more thing," Elijah said. "Everything you've said in this room is being recorded." He didn't say how. He didn't point to the pen. He let the words land. Patricia stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. She walked out without another word. Through the door, before it clicked shut, Elijah heard her say to someone in the hallway, "We have a problem. The kid says he's recording." Good. 2 floors up, Stephen Aldrich was on his 3rd phone call in 20 minutes. The first was with the airline's head of PR, a woman named Monica Chen, who had already drafted a holding statement that said absolutely nothing. The second was with the VP of Operations, who confirmed that the booking record for seat 1A had been corrected to show the seat as vacant. The third was with legal. "How exposed are we?" Aldrich asked. "If there's no video, minimal. Crew testimony versus a minor. We control the documentation. And if there is video, then we need to get ahead of the narrative immediately." Aldrich rubbed his temples. "The kid says he's recording." Silence. "Recording what?" "Audio. Everything. Since the incident." "That's not possible. Those rooms have no cell signal." "He's not using a phone." More silence. Then, "We need that device." "He's a minor, Stephen. We can't search him." "Then get someone who can." That call ended at 8:15 Pacific. At 8:22 Pacific, Patricia Hayward walked back into the security office. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in a dark blazer followed her. He didn't introduce himself. "Elijah, this is Officer Daniels from Airport Police. He needs to conduct a routine safety check of your belongings." Elijah looked at the man. He was tall, thick neck, no expression. The kind of man who was brought into rooms to make people feel small. Why? "Standard procedure for unaccompanied minors." "You already checked my passport. My bag went through the scanner." "This is a secondary check. It won't take long." "Am I being detained?" The question caught them both off guard. A 12-year-old asking if he was being detained. Patricia recovered first. "Of course not. You're free to leave at any time." "Then I'd like to leave, right now, and I'd like to call my father." Patricia and Daniels exchanged a look. It was fast, but Elijah caught it. They hadn't expected him to call the bluff. If he wasn't detained, they couldn't hold him. If they admitted he was detained, they needed cause. And the only cause they had was a fabricated story from a flight attendant who had stolen his boarding pass and struck him in the face. "Elijah, we're just trying to help." "Ma'am, you've been trying to help for 2 hours, and I'm still in this room. I haven't eaten. I haven't spoken to my family. And a woman hit me, and nobody's asked me if I'm okay. Not once." His voice cracked on the last word. Not a lot, just enough. Just enough to remind everyone in that room, including himself, that underneath the steady eyes and the sharp words, he was still a kid who had been slapped by a stranger and locked in a room by people who were supposed to protect him. Patricia Hayward heard that crack, and for 1/2 second, something human flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "Give us 10 more minutes." She walked out. Daniels followed. The door shut. 10 p.m. Pacific. Angela Hammond was sitting in her home office in D.C. with the 15-second video her father had sent playing on loop. She had watched it 47 times. She had called 3 contacts at 3 different news outlets. She had pulled the flight manifest through a source at the FAA. And she had just found a name that made her sit up straight and reach for her phone. Elijah Jeremiah Carter, son of Jeremiah Carter. She knew that name. Every journalist in America who covered finance or policy knew that name. Jeremiah Carter was not just wealthy, he was strategic. He sat on advisory boards. He funded education reform. He held significant shares in 6 major corporations, including, and Angela had to read this twice to believe it, the airline that had just dragged his son out of first class. Angela called her father. "Dad, do you know who that boy is?" "No, I told you, I didn't catch his name." "His name is Elijah Carter. His father is Jeremiah Carter." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "The Jeremiah Carter? The one who owns half the companies in your retirement portfolio?" "Yes." "Lord have mercy. Dad, this isn't just an assault story. This is a shareholder assaulting itself. The airline attacked the child of one of its own major investors. If this gets out, when this gets out, it's not just a PR crisis. It's a corporate earthquake." Gerald leaned back in his seat. The plane was somewhere over Colorado. "Angela, I don't care whose son he is. What I care about is that a grown woman hit a child and 40 people sat there and let it happen, including me. You spoke up." "I spoke up too late." "You recorded it. That matters." "Does it? Because right now that boy is somewhere in that airport and nobody knows if he's okay." Angela was already typing. I'm going to find out. She hung up. She opened her laptop, and she started writing. At 10:34 p.m. Pacific, Jeremiah Carter's private plane touched down at Van Nuys. Raymond Voss, Denise Faulkner, and Marcus Webb were wheels down at Burbank 15 minutes later on a chartered jet. 2 black SUVs were waiting on the tarmac. Jeremiah didn't go to the terminal. Not yet. He went to a hotel suite in Century City that Raymond had booked from the air. Because Jeremiah Carter did not walk into battles, he built the battlefield first. In that suite, over the next 90 minutes, they constructed the case. Marcus Webb pulled up the audio stream from Elijah's device. 47 minutes had become 2 hours and 14 minutes. Every word was there. Karen Mellick's accusations, the slap, the security escort, Patricia Hayward's interrogation, the waiver, the threat of child services, the attempt to search his belongings. Raymond listened to the whole thing with his eyes closed. When it finished, he opened them and said, "This is the clearest case of unlawful detention and assault of a minor I've heard in 20 years of practice." "I don't want a settlement," Jeremiah said. "I know." "I don't want an apology." "I know." "I want the audio played on national television. I want the flight attendant terminated. I want the executives who authorized this cover-up removed from their positions. And I want a federal investigation into the airline's handling of discrimination complaints going back 10 years. Raymond looked at him. "All of that is achievable, but you know what it's going to cost. Not money. Exposure. Your family. Your son's face on every screen. My son's face is already marked by a woman who hit him because he was black and sitting in a seat she thought he didn't earn. The exposure already happened. The only question now is, who controls the story?" Denise Faulkner had been quiet. She spoke now for the first time. "Jeremiah, I pulled the airline's internal systems 20 minutes ago. Seat 1A on your son's flight has been altered. The booking was scrubbed at 7:58 p.m. Pacific. His name was removed. The seat now shows as vacant for the entire flight." The room went still. They deleted his reservation? They didn't just delete it, they overwrote it. The current record shows no booking, no check-in, no boarding scan. As far as the airline system is concerned, your son was never on that plane. Jeremiah's hands were flat on the table. His voice was low. "They're trying to erase him." "Yes." "Can you recover the original record?" Marcus leaned forward. "I already did. I pulled a cached version from the booking engine's backup server before they could purge it. I have the original manifest. Elijah J. Carter, seat 1A, purchased 4 days ago, checked in at 10:47 a.m., boarded at 11:38 a.m. It's all there. They don't know you have this? No, and they won't until you want them to." Jeremiah nodded once. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" Raymond asked. "The chairman of the airline's board of directors." "Jeremiah, it's almost midnight." "I know exactly what time it is." The phone rang 4 times. A man answered. His voice was thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Arthur, it's Jeremiah Carter." Pause, the sound of sheets rustling, a lamp clicking on. Arthur Redmond, 73 years old, chairman of the board for 22 years, was suddenly wide awake. "Jeremiah, what? It's midnight. What's happening?" "What's happening is that 3 hours ago, one of your flight attendants slapped my 12-year-old son in the face in your first-class cabin. Your security team pulled him off the plane. Your guest services manager tried to get him to sign a liability waiver. Your IT department scrubbed his booking from the system. And your regional director authorized all of it." Silence. "Arthur, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice had changed. The sleep was gone. Something else had replaced it. "Jeremiah, I had no knowledge of—" "I know you didn't. That's why I'm calling you first. Because in about 8 hours, the audio recording of everything that happened to my son is going to be played at a press conference inside your terminal. Every news outlet in the country has already been contacted. A federal complaint is being drafted as we speak. And I'm invoking my rights as a major shareholder to call an emergency board review. Jeremiah, can we sit down and We are sitting down. This is the sit down. I'm telling you what's coming so you can decide which side of it you want to be on. Because by tomorrow afternoon, the people who did this to my son will no longer work for your airline. That's not a request. That's not a negotiation. That is what's going to happen. I need to make some calls. Make them fast, Arthur. The sun comes up in 6 hours, and my son is still sitting in a room in your airport, alone. So whatever calls you need to make, I suggest you start with the one that gets my boy out of that room. Jeremiah hung up. Raymond was watching him from across the table. You know Redmond is going to call Aldrich first. I'm counting on it. Let Aldrich panic. Panicked people make mistakes, and I want every mistake on record. 11:47 p.m. Pacific. Elijah was still in the room. 3 hours and 42 minutes. His stomach was empty. His cheek throbbed with a pulse of its own. The fluorescent light had become a kind of torture, that relentless buzzing that burrowed into the space behind his eyes and wouldn't stop. The door opened. Victor Ruiz again. This time his face was different, tighter. He was carrying a bottle of water and a granola bar. Thought you might be hungry. Elijah took the water. He didn't touch the granola bar. Am I leaving? Victor sat down across from him. He folded his hands. He didn't look like a man following protocol anymore. He looked like a man wrestling with something. Son, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. I've been straight with everybody. I know you have. Victor rubbed the back of his neck. The woman on the plane, the flight attendant, did she actually hit you? You saw my face. I need to hear you say it. She slapped me, open hand, left side of my face. I can still feel it. Victor nodded slowly. He looked at the table. He looked at the door. He looked at Elijah. I should have handled this differently. Yes, sir, you should have. Victor flinched, not because the words were harsh, because they were true, and they came from a child who had more courage in a plastic chair than Victor had shown all night. Something's happening upstairs, Victor said. I don't know what, but people are making phone calls who don't usually make phone calls this late. I think somebody found out who you are. I'm Elijah Carter. I've been telling everybody who I am since I sat down in that seat. I mean who your family is. Elijah looked at him. Does that matter? Would you be sitting here with water if my dad was a bus driver? Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. The pen kept recording. At 12:15 a.m., Angela Hammond published the first story. Not a full article, a thread. 6 posts on social media, the 15-second video her father filmed, a description of what he witnessed, and a single question that would be shared 400,000 times before dawn. A black child was slapped and removed from first class today at LAX. Where is he now? The internet didn't just pick it up. The internet detonated. By 12:30 a.m., the hashtag was trending in Los Angeles. By 1 a.m., it was trending nationally. By 1:45 a.m., it was the #1 topic on every major platform in the United States. Hashtag Justice for Elijah. News producers started calling Angela's phone. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The video was doing the work. 15 seconds of silence. An empty seat. A flight attendant walking away, and the ghost of a child who should have been on that plane. At 2 a.m., Stephen Aldrich received 2 phone calls within 4 minutes. The first was from Arthur Redmond, who said 8 words. Fix this before the sun comes up. The second was from the airline's chief communications officer, who said, We're on every screen in America, and we have no statement. Aldrich stood in his home office at 2 in the morning, looking at his phone, watching the numbers climb. Shares, retweets, comments, hundreds of thousands of people who suddenly knew the name Elijah Carter. He called Patricia Hayward. Where is the boy? Still in the security office. Why is he still there? Because you told me to contain, get him out. Now, get his father on the phone. Get someone from guest relations down there with a full apology and a first-class rebooking. Do it in the next 10 minutes. Stephen, if we release him now, it looks like we held a 12-year-old in a room for 4 hours after one of our employees hit him, because that's exactly what we did. Move. Now. He hung up. His hands were shaking. He opened his laptop and typed a search. Jeremiah Carter. He read the first result, then the second, then the third. His face went white. Jeremiah Carter, billionaire investor, policy reform advocate, board advisory member for 3 Fortune 500 companies, and holder of an 8.7% stake in the airline. Aldrich closed his laptop. He picked up his phone and called Arthur Redmond back. "Arthur, we need outside counsel. Tonight." "Why?" "Because the boy's father is Jeremiah Carter, and we just gave him everything he needs to burn this company to the ground." At 2:23 a.m., the door to Elijah's room opened for the last time. Patricia Hayward stood in the doorway. She was no longer smiling. Her eyes were red, her hands were clasped so tight, her knuckles were pale. "Elijah, your father is on his way. A car is waiting to take you to him. I want to, on behalf of the airline, we sincerely—" Elijah stood up. He picked up his bag. He walked past her without a word. Victor Ruiz was in the hallway. He walked Elijah to the car. Neither of them spoke until they reached the curb. "For what it's worth," Victor said, "I'm sorry." Elijah opened the car door. He looked back at Victor. "You asked me if she really hit me. You saw the mark on my face and you still asked. That's the part I won't forget." He got in the car. The door closed, and as the black SUV pulled away from Terminal 4 and merged onto the 405 heading toward Century City, Elijah Carter reached into his bag and clicked the pen one more time. The recording stopped. 4 hours, 11 minutes, and 37 seconds of truth. Uploaded, encrypted, untouchable. The airline had spent the entire night trying to erase a 12-year-old boy. They didn't know that the 12-year-old boy had recorded every single second of them trying. The SUV pulled up to the Century City Hotel at 2:51 a.m. Elijah stepped out, and the night air hit his face. The left side still swollen, still hot, still carrying the shape of a grown woman's hand. A man in a dark suit held the lobby door open. Elijah walked through without looking at him. He crossed the marble floor toward the elevators, and the doors opened before he pressed a button. 14th floor, Suite 1407. The door was already cracked open. Elijah pushed it and saw his father. Jeremiah Carter was standing in the middle of the room, not sitting, not pacing, standing still the way a man stands when he's been holding himself together for hours, and the only thing keeping him vertical is discipline. He was wearing the same suit he'd had on for the board meeting prep. His tie was loosened. His eyes were bloodshot. And when he saw his son walk through that door, his face did something it almost never did in front of other people. It broke. Jeremiah crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to his knees. He took Elijah's face in both hands, turned it gently toward the light, and looked at the mark. The bruise had deepened to a dark violet. The swelling pushed the skin tight. Jeremiah's thumb hovered over it without touching. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." "Don't lie to me, son. It hurts." Jeremiah pulled him in and held him. Elijah's arms hung at his sides for 2 seconds, then 3, and then they came up and grabbed his father's jacket, and he held on the way a drowning person holds a rope. He didn't cry. His body shook once, hard, and then went still. Jeremiah's hand pressed against the back of his son's head, and he said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would undo what had been done. Raymond Voss was standing by the window. Denise Faulkner was at the desk. Marcus Webb had his laptop open. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They let the moment be what it was. After a long time, Jeremiah pulled back and looked at his son's face again. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Elijah sat down on the edge of the bed. He started with the boarding pass. He told his father about Karen Mellick, her face, her voice, the way she looked at him like he was dirt on a clean floor. He told him about the grab, the slap, the word aggressive. He told him about Victor Ruiz and the convenient choice to remove him instead of question the attendant. He told him about the room, the dead camera, the dead signal. He told him about Patricia Hayward and the waiver. He told him about the attempt to search his bag. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the pen. "I used it, Dad. I clicked it the second she grabbed my arm. Everything is on there." Jeremiah took the pen. He held it in his palm like it weighed 100 pounds. You did exactly right. Dad? Yeah? The lady from guest services, Patricia. She said they checked the system and my seat was vacant, that I was never booked. Jeremiah looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded. They altered the record, Elijah. They tried to erase your booking. Elijah stared at his father. They can do that? They did do that, but Marcus recovered the original before they could destroy it. So they were going to pretend I was never on the plane? Yes, even with the mark on my face? Even with the mark on your face. Elijah went quiet. He looked at his hands. For the first time since it all started, he looked like what he was, a 12-year-old boy who had just learned something terrible about the world he lived in. Dad, that man, the security guard, Victor, he asked me at the end if she really hit me. He could see my face. He could see the bruise. And he still asked. Why did he need me to say it when he could already see it? Jeremiah sat down next to him. Because seeing and believing are two different things for some people, especially when believing means they have to do something about it. That's not right. No, it's not. So what are we going to do? Jeremiah looked at his son, 12 years old, bruised, exhausted, still asking the right question. We're going to make sure this never happens to another child on that airline again. 3:30 a.m. Pacific. Raymond called the team together. Jeremiah told Elijah to sleep, but Elijah said he wasn't tired. He wasn't. His body was wired with the kind of electricity that comes after prolonged fear. The adrenaline had nowhere to go. Here's where we stand, Raymond said. We have 4 hours and 11 minutes of encrypted audio. We have the recovered booking record. We have Gerald Hammond as an eyewitness. We have the 15-second video his daughter published, which has now been viewed over 2 million times. And we have the mark on Elijah's face, which we need to photograph and document before it fades. Denise had already called a forensic physician. Dr. Linda Osei, a specialist in pediatric injury assessment, was on her way from Cedars-Sinai. She arrived at 4:10 a.m., examined Elijah, photographed the bruise from 6 angles under controlled lighting, and documented it with measurements. She noted in her report that the injury was consistent with a single open palm strike from an adult, delivered with moderate to significant force. She also noted grip pattern bruising on the left upper arm, consistent with forceful restraint. Elijah sat through the examination without flinching. When Dr. Osei asked if he was okay, he said, "I will be." 4:45 a.m. Marcus Webb finished his forensic analysis of the audio. He had time-stamped every significant moment. The initial confrontation, the slap, audible at minute 6, a sharp percussive sound, followed by 3 seconds of cabin silence. Karen Mellick's voice calling Elijah aggressive. Patricia Hayward's interrogation. The waiver request. The threat of Child Protective Services. The attempt to search his belongings. But Marcus had found something else, something nobody expected. Jeremiah, I need you to listen to this. He played a segment from hour 2 of the recording. Elijah was alone in the room. No one was speaking to him. But the pen was sensitive enough to pick up sound through the walls. Muffled, but audible once Marcus ran it through his enhancement software. 2 voices. One was Patricia Hayward. The other was Stephen Aldrich on speakerphone. Patricia, the kid says he's recording. Aldrich, recording how? There's no signal down there. Patricia, I don't know, but he said it directly to my face. Aldrich, then we need to move fast. Have you modified the booking? IT is handling it now. Good. Make sure the seat shows vacant from origin. No check-in record. No boarding scan. If anyone pulls the manifest, his name shouldn't be on it. And the physical contact, the crew member? Self-defense. The minor became combative. She restrained him. That's the report. Stephen, she slapped him. There are passengers who saw it. Passengers saw a disturbance. Play it again. Marcus played it again. Jeremiah listened with his eyes closed. When it finished, he opened them. How fast can you get this to every major news outlet in the country? 30 minutes? Don't do it yet. I want to play it myself, in person, at the airport, with cameras rolling. Raymond leaned forward. You want a press conference. I want a press conference inside Terminal 4, the same terminal where they held my son. I want every network there. I want the airline's executives watching live. And I want them to hear their own voices played back to them before they have time to build another lie. Denise looked at her watch. It's not even 5 a.m. We'd need to move fast. Then move fast. 5:15 a.m. Angela Hammond's social media thread had crossed 10 million views. The hashtag Justice for Elijah was trending in all 50 states and 14 countries. Every major cable network had producers en route to LAX. Civil rights organizations were drafting statements. 3 members of Congress had already posted public demands for an investigation. The airline's stock, which traded on Asian markets through overnight futures, had dropped 4% in 3 hours. And Karen Mellick, the woman who started it all, was in a hotel room near JFK, asleep. She had landed at 11 p.m. Eastern, taken a shuttle to a crew hotel, and gone to bed believing that the situation had been handled, that the boy was dealt with, that the system had done what it always did. Her phone was on silent. She had 37 missed calls. 5:30 a.m. Pacific. Jeremiah made the call that changed everything. Not to a lawyer, not to a journalist, not to the airline. He called Ruth. The phone rang once. Jeremiah? Mama. Is my baby okay? He's okay. He's with me. He's safe. What happened? Jeremiah told her. He told her all of it. The slap, the room, the waiver, the deleted record. He told her about the audio. He told her about the bruise. He told her what the airline had tried to do to her grandson. Ruth didn't make a sound for a full minute. Jeremiah thought the call had dropped. Mama? I'm here. Her voice was steady, but it had an edge to it that Jeremiah had only heard twice in his life. Once, when his brother was arrested at 16 for nothing, and once when a teacher told Ruth that her son Jeremiah wasn't college material. You do what you have to do, Ruth said, and you make sure they feel it. I will. Put my baby on the phone. Jeremiah handed the phone to Elijah. Hi, Grandma. Elijah Jeremiah Carter, are you hurt? I'm okay. I didn't ask if you're okay. I asked if you're hurt. My cheek is bruised, and my arm. Silence. Then, you remember what I wrote in that note? Yes, ma'am, the prophet who stood alone and still won. That's right, and you stood, didn't you? Yes, ma'am. Then you already won, baby. Everything else is just the world catching up. 6 a.m. Pacific, dawn. Raymond's team had contacted every major network: ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and 6 digital outlets confirmed crews at LAX by 8 a.m. A conference room in Terminal 4 was secured through a contact at the airport authority, a man who owed Jeremiah a favor from a foundation event 3 years ago, and didn't hesitate when the call came. Denise filed a preliminary federal complaint with the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. She also filed a civil rights complaint with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division and a separate report with the FBI's field office in Los Angeles, citing assault of a minor, conspiracy to destroy evidence, and unlawful detention. Marcus had backed up every piece of digital evidence to 3 separate secure servers: the original audio, the recovered booking record, the metadata from the airline's system alteration, which showed the exact time, 7:58 p.m., that Elijah's name was scrubbed. He also pulled Karen Mellick's text message to her colleague. Handled the kid. Done. 4 words that would be read on national television before noon. At 6:40 a.m., Jeremiah received a call from Arthur Redmond. Jeremiah, I've been up all night. I've spoken with legal, with operations, with the board's executive committee. We want to resolve this. I'm sure you do. We're prepared to offer a full apology, public, unequivocal. We'll terminate the flight attendant. We'll compensate your son. We'll establish a review committee. And we'll... Arthur, stop. Jeremiah, you're offering me a settlement at 6 in the morning because you're afraid of what happens at 8. I'm not taking a settlement. I'm not taking money. I'm not taking a committee that reports to the same people who tried to erase my son from a flight manifest. What do you want? I want the truth played in public. I want your executives to hear their own words. I want the American people to hear what your airline did to a child when it thought nobody was listening. And then I want a federal investigation. Not your investigation, not your committee, federal. Jeremiah, if you do this, the stock will. I don't care about the stock. You're a shareholder. I'm a father first, and you had my son locked in a basement for 4 hours. So I'm going to ask you one time, Arthur. Are you going to stand on the right side of this, or are you going to stand with the people who hit my boy and tried to cover it up? The line was silent for 10 seconds. 15. I'll be at the press conference, Arthur said. Good. 7 a.m. Elijah was sitting on the hotel bed eating scrambled eggs from room service. His father was across the room on the phone, in a voice Elijah had never heard before. Not angry, something beyond anger, something cold and precise and absolutely certain. Elijah watched him the way you watch a storm coming, not with fear, but with the knowledge that the world was about to change. Dad, Jeremiah covered the phone. Yeah? Are you going to play the recording? All of it? All of it. They're going to hear me in that room, alone, scared. Yeah, they are. Good. Jeremiah looked at his son, and for the second time that night, his face broke, but only for a moment. He turned back to the phone. At 7:15 a.m., Karen Mellick woke up in her hotel room near JFK. She reached for her phone, and the screen was flooded with notifications. Missed calls from the airline, from her union rep, from 3 numbers she didn't recognize, text messages from colleagues. Call me now. Have you seen the news? Karen, what did you do? She opened a browser. Her hands were already shaking. The first result was the video. 15 seconds. 2 million views had become 26 million. Her face wasn't in it, but her name was in every comment. Every quote, every headline. Flight attendant slaps black boy in first class. Airline covers up assault on 12-year-old. Justice for Elijah. What really happened on Flight 2214? Karen dropped her phone. It hit the carpet and the screen kept glowing. Headline after headline scrolling past like a verdict being read. She picked it up and called the airline's crew hotline. It rang 6 times. Operations, this is Janet. This is Karen Mellick, badge 7743. I need to speak with my supervisor. Karen, hold please. She was on hold for 11 minutes. When a voice finally came back, it wasn't her supervisor. It was a man from legal. Ms. Mellick, this is Tom Reardon from the airline's legal department. I need to advise you that you've been placed on immediate, unpaid suspension pending an internal investigation. You are not to speak with media, post on social media, or contact any passengers from Flight 2214. Do you understand? I was following protocol. The passenger was unauthorized. Ms. Mellick, I strongly advise you not to make any statements at this time. He didn't have a valid ticket. The airline's records show that the passenger was booked in seat 1A with a confirmed ticket purchased 4 days prior to departure. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ms. Mellick, do you understand the terms of your suspension? That's not what the system showed. When I checked, the seat was, we'll discuss the details in the formal review. For now, you are suspended. A representative from HR will contact you within 24 hours. The call ended. Karen sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She looked at her blazer hanging on the back of the chair, the one she'd worn on the flight. She reached into the left pocket. The boy's boarding pass was still there. She unfolded it. Elijah J. Carter, Seat 1A, First Class, confirmed. She had known it was real the moment she took it from his hand. She had known it when she folded it and put it in her pocket. She had known it when she told security he had no ticket. She stared at the name, and for the first time, something that might have been the beginning of understanding moved across her face. But it came too late. It came hours too late. It came after the slap, after the lie, after the cover-up, after 26 million people watched a 15-second video and saw the truth she had tried to hide. Karen Mellick put the boarding pass on the nightstand. She picked up her phone and called her attorney. 7:45 a.m. Pacific, 15 minutes before the press conference. Terminal 4 was already surrounded. News vans lined the curb. Camera crews jockeyed for position near the conference room entrance. Reporters checked their notes, their angles, their earpieces. The story had been running all night, and it was about to hit a new gear, and everyone knew it. Inside the conference room, Raymond Voss tested the audio system. Marcus Webb queued up the recordings on a laptop connected to speakers and a projection screen. Denise Faulkner organized the legal documents, the federal complaints, the recovered booking record, the forensic physician's report, the photographs of Elijah's injuries. Jeremiah stood near the back of the room. He was wearing a fresh suit. His face showed nothing. His hands were steady. Elijah stood next to him. He had changed clothes. The bruise on his cheek was dark against his skin. He hadn't tried to cover it. "You don't have to go out there," Jeremiah said. "I know. Nobody will think less of you if you wait in the car. I'm not waiting in the car." "Elijah, Dad, they made me sit in that room for 4 hours because they thought nobody was coming. I want them to see that somebody came." Jeremiah put his hand on his son's shoulder. He didn't squeeze. He just let it rest there. Arthur Redmond arrived at 7:52. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He walked straight to Jeremiah, extended his hand, and said, "I'm sorry about your son. Save it for the cameras, Arthur, and then back it up with action." At 7:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the press conference was scheduled to begin, Denise received a phone call. She listened for 30 seconds, hung up, and walked over to Jeremiah. The Department of Justice just opened a preliminary inquiry. They're sending a team from D.C. Jeremiah didn't react. He adjusted his tie. "And Jeremiah, one more thing. The airline's stock opened in pre-market trading 12 minutes ago. And it's down 11%. Trading is under review for a possible halt." Jeremiah looked at his son. Elijah looked back at him. "Let's go," Jeremiah said. The doors opened. The cameras were already rolling. Jeremiah Carter walked to the podium at exactly 8 a.m. He did not rush. He did not smile. He placed one hand on each side of the lectern and looked out at the room. Over 60 journalists, 14 cameras, 9 microphones mounted on the podium itself, lights so bright they turned the air white. Behind him sat Raymond Voss, Denise Faulkner, and Arthur Redmond. To his left, in a chair placed slightly apart from the others, sat Elijah. The bruise on the boy's face was the first thing every camera found. Jeremiah waited for the room to settle. He let the silence do the work. 5 seconds. 10. When the last murmur died, he spoke. "Yesterday afternoon, my 12-year-old son boarded a commercial flight at this airport. He had a confirmed first-class ticket. He had a valid passport. He sat in his assigned seat, buckled his seatbelt, and opened a book. Within 15 minutes, a flight attendant accused him of trespassing. She confiscated his boarding pass. She grabbed him by the arm, and then she struck him across the face." He paused. "My son is 12 years old. He weighs 93 pounds. The woman who hit him is a 43-year-old airline employee in a position of authority. After she struck him, she told the cabin he was aggressive. Security removed him from the aircraft. He was taken to a windowless room in this terminal and held for over 4 hours. During that time, no one contacted me. No one contacted his grandmother. No one offered him food, water, or medical attention. Instead, a representative from the airline attempted to coerce him into signing a liability waiver. When he refused, he was threatened with Child Protective Services." A murmur rippled through the press corps. Jeremiah let it pass. But that is not the worst of it. While my son sat alone in that room, the airline's operations team altered its own booking system. They deleted his reservation. They scrubbed his name from the flight manifest. They erased every digital record that proved he was ever on that plane. They did this deliberately, with authorization from senior management, in an attempt to deny that the assault ever took place. The murmur became noise. Hands went up. Voices called out. Jeremiah raised one palm, and the room went quiet again. "I'm not going to ask you to take my word for it. I'm going to let you hear it for yourselves." He turned to Marcus. Marcus pressed play. The first thing the room heard was Karen Mellick's voice. "This is first class." Then Elijah's, "Yes, ma'am." Then the demand for the ticket. Then the exchange. Calm, polite, a child doing everything right. Then the grab, a sharp intake of breath, and then the slap. The sound filled the room like a physical thing, a crack so sharp and sudden that 3 reporters in the front row flinched. A woman from CNN closed her eyes. A cameraman from a local affiliate lowered his viewfinder and stared at the speakers. Then Karen's voice again, louder now, harder. "We have an unaccompanied minor who's become aggressive. I need security to the forward cabin." Marcus let the recording continue. Victor Ruiz arriving. Karen lying about the ticket. General Hammond speaking up from row 3. The removal. The walk through the jet bridge. The door of the security office closing. Then Patricia Hayward's voice. "Has anyone ever told you it's wrong to go into places where you don't belong?" Someone in the press corps said, "Jesus," loud enough to be picked up on the podium microphones. Then the waiver. "I need you to sign this." And Elijah's voice, steady and clear. "I'm not signing anything." Then the threat. "We may need to involve Child Protective Services." Then Elijah's response. "I know my rights. You can't hold a minor in a room without contacting a parent or legal guardian first." A reporter from the Washington Post looked at her colleague and shook her head. She was already writing. Marcus paused the recording. Jeremiah turned back to the microphones. "What you just heard was captured by a personal recording device my son activated when the flight attendant grabbed his arm. The recording is 4 hours, 11 minutes, and 37 seconds long. But there is one more segment I want you to hear. This was captured through the walls of the room where my son was being held. The voices belong to Patricia Hayward, the airline's guest services manager who interrogated my son, and Stephen Aldrich, the regional director of customer relations, speaking on speakerphone. Marcus pressed play. Aldrich's voice came through the speakers with perfect clarity. "Have you modified the booking?" And Patricia's response, "IT is handling it now." Then Aldrich again. "Make sure the seat shows vacant from origin, no check-in record, no boarding scan. If anyone pulls the manifest, his name shouldn't be on it." The room erupted. Every hand went up. Voices overlapped. Camera shutters fired in rapid succession. But Jeremiah wasn't finished. "And the physical contact? The crew member?" Patricia's voice on the recording. Then Aldrich. "Self-defense. The minor became combative. She restrained him. That's the report." Patricia, quieter now. "Stephen, she slapped him. There are passengers who saw it." Aldrich. "Passengers saw a disturbance. That's all they saw. Keep the statement vague. Use the words safety protocol and de-escalation. And get that kid to sign the waiver before his parents show up." Patricia. "He won't sign." Aldrich. "Then hold him until he does." Marcus stopped the recording. The room was chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Cameramen were repositioning. Producers were speaking into earpieces. The story had just detonated. Jeremiah waited. He didn't try to quiet the room this time. He let the fury burn for 30 seconds. Then he leaned into the microphone. "I am a shareholder in this airline. As of this morning, I am invoking my rights under the Corporate Governance Charter to demand an emergency board review. I am calling for the immediate termination of Karen Mellick, Patricia Hayward, and Stephen Aldrich. I am calling for a full federal investigation into the airline's handling of discrimination complaints, its use of booking system manipulation to destroy evidence, and its treatment of unaccompanied minors. These requests have already been filed with the Department of Transportation, the Department of Justice, and the FBI." He stepped back from the podium. Then he stepped forward again. "One last thing. I want to be clear about something. I did not call this press conference because I'm wealthy. I called it because I had the evidence, the resources, and the platform to make sure the truth was heard. But what happened to my son happens every day to children who don't have a father with lawyers. It happens to people who don't have recordings. It happens to families who can't fight back. This is not about one flight attendant. This is about a system that looked at a black child in a first-class seat and decided, before checking a single document, that he didn't belong. And then, when confronted with the truth, chose to destroy the evidence rather than face it. He turned and looked at Elijah. "My son would like to say something." The room went still. Every camera shifted. Every microphone adjusted. Elijah stood up from his chair and walked to the podium. He had to stand on his toes slightly to reach the microphone. The bruise on his cheek was facing the cameras directly now. He didn't turn away from it. My name is Elijah Carter. I'm 12 years old. Yesterday, I was hit by someone who was supposed to keep me safe. She didn't ask me who I was. She just decided I didn't belong. And when I told the truth, nobody believed me. They locked me in a room and tried to make me sign a paper that said it was my fault. I didn't sign it. I'm not going to lie about what happened to make somebody else comfortable. He paused. The room was so quiet, the air conditioning sounded like a roar. My grandmother told me before I got on that plane, don't let anybody make you feel small. I didn't, and I won't. He stepped back. He sat down. 8:34 a.m. The press conference went to live Q&A. The first question came from a reporter at the New York Times. Mr. Carter, can you confirm that the airline attempted to involve Child Protective Services as a pressure tactic against your son? I can. The audio recording confirms it. Patricia Hayward explicitly threatened my son with CPS involvement if he refused to sign a waiver releasing the airline from liability. And the booking record. Do you have documentation of the alteration? Denise Faulkner stepped to the microphone. We have the original booking record recovered from the airline's backup server, time-stamped and authenticated. We also have the altered record, which was modified at 7:58 p.m. Pacific last night. The metadata shows the change was authorized from a terminal registered to the airline's IT Operations Center. We've preserved both versions and submitted them to federal investigators. The next question came from CNN. Mr. Redmond, as chairman of the board, were you aware of any of this before Mr. Carter's phone call last night? Arthur Redmond stood up slowly. He looked like a man stepping into traffic. No, I was not aware. I learned of the incident from Mr. Carter at approximately midnight. I immediately contacted our legal and operations teams. What I've heard this morning, what we've all heard, is deeply disturbing. I want to be clear that the actions taken by the individuals involved do not represent the values of this airline. A reporter from Fox called out, Mr. Redmond, with respect, the regional director authorized the cover-up using airline systems and airline personnel. At what point does individual misconduct become institutional policy? Redmond opened his mouth. Nothing came out for 3 seconds. Then he said, that is exactly what the board review will determine. Will Stephen Aldrich be terminated? Personnel decisions will be made following a thorough. Jeremiah stepped back to the microphone. Stephen Aldrich authorized the deletion of my son's booking record, instructed staff to fabricate a false incident report, and ordered the unlawful detention of a minor. If the board doesn't terminate him by the end of business today, I will call a shareholder vote to replace the board. The room exploded again. Arthur Redmond sat down. His face was gray. 8:52 a.m. While the press conference was still in progress, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, the New York Stock Exchange halted trading on the airline's stock. The price had dropped 19% since pre-market opening. The halt was automatic, triggered by the speed and volume of the sell-off. Second, the FBI's Los Angeles field office issued a statement confirming that it had opened a preliminary investigation into allegations of assault, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations involving a commercial airline at Los Angeles International Airport. Third, Karen Mellick's union representative called her in her hotel room near JFK and told her she had 30 minutes to surrender her airline credentials and badge before airport security came to collect them. Karen didn't argue. She didn't protest. She said, I understand, and hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the boarding pass still sitting on her nightstand. Elijah J. Carter, seat 1A, first class, confirmed. She picked it up. She turned it over. On the back, in small print that nobody ever reads, was the airline's customer commitment statement. Every passenger deserves dignity, respect, and safety from the moment they board. Karen folded the pass and put it in her purse. Then she called her attorney for the second time that morning. They terminated me. Suspended, not terminated, not yet. It's coming. Karen, I need to ask you directly. Did you strike the boy? Silence. Karen, he wouldn't move. That's not what I asked. Yes, I hit him. But he He grabbed back at me and Karen, stop. Do not say another word on this phone. I'm coming to you. Don't talk to anyone. Don't open your door for anyone except me. And whatever you do, do not turn on the television. She turned on the television. Her name was on every channel. Not her face. The airline hadn't released her photo yet. But her name, Karen Melick, flight attendant, badge 7743, 14 years of service. And the word that followed her name on every chyron, every headline, every anchor's lips, assault. She turned the television off. Then she turned it back on. Then she threw the remote across the room and it shattered against the wall. And she sat there, shaking, watching a muted screen flash images of Elijah Carter's bruised face next to the airline's logo, while words scrolled beneath like a sentence being read. 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Jeremiah and Elijah left the press conference through a side exit. Raymond had a car waiting. They got in, and the door closed, and for the first time in 16 hours, they were alone together. No lawyers, no cameras, no strategy. Elijah leaned his head against the window. Dad? Yeah? That man, the one from row 3, Gerald, the one who spoke up. What about him? He was the only one. Out of everybody on that plane, he was the only one who said something. I know. I want to thank him. We'll find him. And Dad? Yeah? The security guard, Victor. At the end, he said he was sorry. I heard that on the recording. Do you think he meant it? Jeremiah looked at his son. I think he meant it too late. Is too late better than never? That's not for me to decide. That's for you. Elijah turned back to the window. He watched the city pass by. He was 12 years old, and in the last 18 hours he had been assaulted, detained, interrogated, threatened, and turned into a national story. He should have been in school. He should have been reading his book. He should have been eating lunch with his father in New York, like they planned. Instead, he was riding through Los Angeles with a bruise on his face that the whole country had now seen. Dad, is it going to stop? Is what going to stop? The attention, the cameras, people knowing my name. Jeremiah took a long breath. Not for a while. I didn't ask for this. I know you didn't. But it matters, right? What we did today, it matters. It matters more than you know. 10 a.m. Pacific. The dominoes began to fall. At 10:07, Stephen Aldrich was escorted from airline headquarters by 2 members of the company's internal security team. His access badge was deactivated. His company phone was confiscated. His computer was seized by the forensics team that the board had authorized at 9:30 a.m. He did not make a statement. He did not look at the cameras that had gathered at the building entrance. He got into a silver sedan and drove away. His career with the airline, 30 years, 4 CEOs, 2 mergers, 1 covered-up discrimination lawsuit, was over in the time it took to walk from his office to the parking garage. At 10:22, Patricia Hayward tendered her resignation. She did not wait to be fired. Her resignation letter was 3 sentences long. I resign effective immediately. I regret the harm caused. I will cooperate fully with any investigation. Her attorney sent it electronically while Patricia sat in her car in the airport parking structure, unable to drive because her hands would not stop shaking. At 10:45, the airline issued its first public statement. It was 4 paragraphs long and had been rewritten 11 times since 5 a.m. It expressed deep concern about the incident involving a young passenger. It confirmed the suspension of Karen Melick. It announced the departure of Stephen Aldrich and Patricia Hayward. It pledged full cooperation with federal investigators, and it committed to a comprehensive review of crew training, security protocols, and anti-discrimination policies. It did not use the word assault. It did not use the word slap. It did not mention the deleted booking record, and it did not apologize. Jeremiah read it in the car. He handed his phone to Raymond. They still can't say it, Jeremiah said. They're protecting the litigation position. They're protecting themselves. Same thing they've been doing since my son's cheek was still warm. Raymond looked at the statement again. We can use this. The gap between what we played in that room and what they're willing to say publicly, that gap is the whole case. I know. At 11 a.m., Gerald Hammond landed at LAX on a return flight. He had cut his trip short the moment his daughter told him the story had gone national. He walked through the terminal and was met at the gate by Angela, who had flown in from D.C. overnight. "Dad." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I'm angry. There's a difference." Angela had already arranged for Gerald to give a recorded statement to federal investigators that afternoon. But first, Gerald had one request. "I want to talk to the boy's father." Angela made the call. 30 minutes later, Gerald Hammond and Jeremiah Carter stood face to face for the first time. Gerald was 67. Jeremiah was 44. They shook hands, and Gerald held on. "I should have done more," Gerald said. "You spoke when no one else did." "I spoke from my seat. I should have stood up. I should have gotten between that woman and your son. I spent 38 years teaching children that adults would protect them. And when it mattered, I sat in a leather chair and raised my voice from 6 feet away." Mr. Hammond, your voice is the reason we have a witness. Your video is the reason the world knows. You didn't just speak up. You broke the silence. And my son asked me this morning to find you so he could thank you himself. Gerald's eyes filled. He blinked hard and looked away. "Where is he?" Jeremiah turned. Elijah was standing behind him. He walked up to Gerald and extended his hand. Gerald took it. "Thank you, sir, for saying something, for telling the truth." Gerald put his other hand on top of Elijah's. "Son, you shouldn't have to thank an old man for doing the bare minimum. But I promise you this, I will never sit silent again, not for the rest of my life." Elijah nodded. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened, something that had been clenched tight since the moment a stranger's hand hit his cheek in a seat he paid for. 11:47 a.m. The FBI team arrived at LAX, 4 agents, 2 from the Civil Rights Division, 2 from white-collar crime. They set up in a conference room on the administrative level and began reviewing the evidence Marcus Webb had prepared. The audio, the booking records, the metadata, the forensic physician's report. They also subpoenaed the airline's internal communications from the previous 18 hours, including all emails, texts, and phone logs involving Stephen Aldrich, Patricia Hayward, Karen Mellick, and the IT operations team that altered the booking system. At 12:15 p.m., trading on the airline stock resumed briefly, then halted again when the price dropped another 7% in 9 minutes. The total decline since the story broke was now 26%. Analysts estimated the market cap loss at $4.3 billion. At 12:30 p.m., 3 United States senators issued a joint statement calling for congressional hearings on airline passenger rights, crew accountability, and the treatment of minors in commercial aviation. At 12:48 p.m., the airline's board of directors held an emergency session by conference call. 11 members, Arthur Redmond presiding. The call lasted 41 minutes. When it ended, Redmond released a second statement, this one very different from the first. It used the word assault. It used the word cover-up. It named Karen Mellick, Stephen Aldrich, and Patricia Hayward by title. It announced that Karen Mellick had been formally terminated. It announced the creation of an independent oversight committee to investigate the airline's handling of discrimination complaints. It committed to new federal review standards for crew conduct, unaccompanied minor protocols, and booking system integrity. And at the end, in the final line, it said something that corporate statements almost never say. "We failed Elijah Carter. We are sorry." 1 p.m. Pacific. Jeremiah read the second statement aloud to Elijah in the hotel suite. When he finished, he put the phone down. "Is that enough?" Elijah asked. "No," Jeremiah said, "but it's a start." Ruth called at 1:15. Jeremiah put her on speaker. "I saw the press conference," she said. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing. The church is praying. The whole block is praying. Mrs. Henderson from next door came over with a casserole, and she doesn't even cook." Elijah laughed. It was the first time he'd laughed since before the flight. The sound of it filled the room, and Jeremiah closed his eyes and let it wash over him like water. "Grandma, did you see me at the podium?" "Baby, I watched you stand up there with that bruise on your face and tell the truth to the whole world, and I have never been prouder of anything in my entire life." I was scared. I know you were. That's what brave means. It means you're scared and you do it anyway. Grandma? Yes, baby? Your note, the one you put in my bag. I read it in that room, when I was alone. It was the only thing that kept me from giving up. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that edge to it, the one that was not sadness and not anger, but something older and fiercer than both. You listen to me, Elijah Jeremiah Carter. You were never alone in that room. You hear me? God was in that room. Your grandfather was in that room. Every ancestor who ever sat in a place someone told them they didn't belong, they were all in that room with you. And they are so proud of you right now that heaven itself is making noise. Elijah pressed his hand against his bruised cheek. I love you, Grandma. I love you more than everything. Now put your daddy back on so I can tell him to make sure you eat something. Jeremiah took the phone. Ruth told him to feed the boy. Jeremiah said he would. Ruth said she'd be on the first flight to Los Angeles in the morning. Jeremiah said he'd send a car. Don't send a car. I'll take a taxi like a normal person. Mama, you're 71, and I've been taking taxis since before you were born. Send a car if it makes you feel useful, but I'm coming regardless. She hung up. Jeremiah looked at Elijah. Elijah looked at his father. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The worst was behind them, and the hardest was still ahead, and they both knew it. But they were together, and the truth was out. And every lie the airline had told was now playing on screens in airports, living rooms, offices, and phones across the country. The airline had spent 18 hours trying to erase Elijah Carter, and now his name was the most searched term in America. 2 days passed, 48 hours that moved like a freight train through every boardroom, newsroom, and living room in America. And on the morning of the third day, Elijah Carter woke up in the Century City Hotel to the sound of his grandmother's voice in the next room, arguing with room service about how they scrambled eggs. Too wet. Take them back. Tell the chef to use a dry pan and some respect. Elijah sat up. His cheek still ached. The bruise had shifted from deep violet to a greenish yellow that spread from his cheekbone to the edge of his jaw. He touched it gently. It was tender, but the swelling was down. He got out of bed and walked into the sitting room. Ruth was standing at the door, sending a room service attendant away with a plate of eggs she deemed unacceptable. Jeremiah was at the table with his laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, a cup of coffee, untouched and cold, beside him. He had been on calls since 5 a.m. Grandma, Ruth turned. She crossed the room and took his face in her hands the way she always did. Palms warm, thumbs resting just below his eyes, studying him the way you study something precious that someone tried to break. How does it feel? Better. Does it hurt when you chew? A little. Then we're getting you soft food. Sit down. Elijah sat. Ruth ordered new eggs, scrambled dry, toast, orange juice, and oatmeal. She watched him eat every bite. When he finished, she took the plate away herself and said, "Now, tell me what happens today." Jeremiah hung up the phone. He looked at his mother and his son, and for a moment his face held something close to exhaustion and something closer to peace. "Today, we go home." "Not yet," Ruth said. "First you tell me what's happening with that woman." Jeremiah leaned back. Karen Mellick was formally terminated yesterday. The union filed a grievance on her behalf, but withdrew it this morning after 3 separate crew members came forward with prior complaints against her. What kind of complaints? 2 passengers of color reported being questioned about their seating assignments by Mellick in the last 18 months. Both were in first class. Both had valid tickets. Neither was physically touched, but both filed written complaints. The airline investigated neither. Ruth's jaw tightened. "So my grandbaby wasn't a first." "No, Mama, he wasn't. He was just the first one somebody couldn't shut up." Jeremiah nodded. Elijah stopped chewing and looked at his father. "There were others? Before me?" "2 that we know of. There may be more. The federal investigation will determine that." "Did they get help?" "They filed complaints. The airline closed both cases within 72 hours. No disciplinary action, no follow-up." Elijah put his fork down. "So if I didn't have the pen, if I didn't have you, if Gerald didn't have the video, it would have been the same thing. They would have closed it, and nothing would have happened. Jeremiah didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, that's why this matters. That's exactly why this matters. 9 a.m., day 3. Raymond Voss called. Jeremiah put him on speaker. The FBI finished their preliminary review of the airline's internal communications. They've expanded the investigation. Expanded how? Beyond the incident itself, they're now looking at the airline's pattern of handling discrimination complaints over the past decade. The 2 prior complaints against Melek were just the surface. Marcus pulled metadata from the airline's HR system last night. In the last 10 years, there have been 43 formal complaints of racial discrimination filed by passengers. 43. Do you know how many resulted in crew discipline? Tell me. 2. 2 out of 43, and both of those were verbal warnings that expired after 6 months. The rest were closed with no action, filed away, buried. Ruth, who had been listening, said one word: Lord. Raymond continued. Denise is preparing an amended federal complaint that includes the pattern evidence. The DOJ team in Los Angeles is working with the FBI to subpoena the full HR database. And Jeremiah, 3 more passengers from yesterday's flight have contacted us through Angela Hammond's reporting. 2 of them are willing to testify that they witnessed the slap and that Karen Melek used unreasonable force. What about the others? The others don't want to be involved. They're afraid of retaliation. From who? From the airline, from the public, from the process. You'd be surprised how many people watch injustice happen and then decide their own comfort is more important than someone else's child. Jeremiah wasn't surprised. He had watched it happen in real time through his son's recording. 41 passengers. 1 spoke up. Raymond, what about David Park, the flight attendant in the galley? Park gave a written statement to the FBI last night. He confirmed that Karen Melek told him she didn't need to check the ticket because she could tell when someone doesn't belong. He also confirmed that he witnessed the slap from approximately 6 feet away. Did he intervene? No. Did he report it? Not until yesterday. Why? Fear. He's a junior crew member. Melek had seniority. He said he froze. He said he's been unable to sleep since it happened. Ruth shook her head. Fear is not an excuse when a child is being hurt. That young man stood 6 feet away and watched the woman hit my grandson. Fear. Everybody's afraid. You think Elijah wasn't afraid? He was 12 years old in a room by himself, and he still didn't break. Nobody in that room had an answer for Ruth Carter, because she was right. 10:30 a.m., Jeremiah received a call he didn't expect. It came from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. Mr. Carter, my name is Victor Ruiz. I was the security officer who... I know who you are. Silence. Then Victor spoke again, and his voice had a roughness to it that came from somewhere deeper than his throat. I need to say something to you, and I need you to hear me out. Go ahead. I made the wrong call. I looked at that boy. I looked at your son, and I saw the mark on his face, and I knew something was wrong. I knew it in my gut. But I removed him from the plane anyway because it was easier, because the crew member told me a story, and I accepted it, because accepting it meant I didn't have to fight. I've been in airport security for 11 years. I've handled hundreds of removals, and I have never once felt the way I felt walking your son off that aircraft. I knew I was doing the wrong thing, and I did it anyway, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. Jeremiah listened. He didn't interrupt. I should have checked her pocket. I should have demanded the boarding pass. I should have called a supervisor. I should have done any one of a dozen things that I am trained to do, and I did none of them. And the reason I didn't, Mr. Carter, the reason I didn't is because when a person in authority tells you a story that fits a pattern you've already accepted, it's easier to go along with it than to challenge it. Even when a child is sitting in front of you with a handprint on his face. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to know that I understand what I did and that I'm cooperating fully with the federal investigation. Jeremiah was quiet for a long time. Then he said, My son asked me whether your apology was real. I told him that wasn't for me to decide. It was for him. If you want to make this right, Victor, don't call me. Write a letter to Elijah. Tell him what you just told me. He deserves to hear it from you. I will. And Victor, one more thing. When you walked him off that plane, he told you that you made a mistake. Do you remember that? I remember. He was right. The call ended. Elijah had been listening from the doorway. Jeremiah looked at him. You heard? I heard. What do you think? Elijah considered this for a long time, longer than most 12-year-olds would. I think he's telling the truth. I think he's ashamed. And I think shame is better than nothing, but it's not the same as courage. Jeremiah looked at his mother. Ruth looked at her grandson, and for a moment, the three of them sat in a silence that held more weight than any courtroom. 12 p.m., Day 3. Angela Hammond published her full investigative piece. It ran in the Washington Chronicle at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It was 12,000 words long. It detailed the assault, the cover-up, the deleted booking record, the audio evidence, the prior complaints, and the airline's decade-long pattern of dismissing discrimination reports. It named names, it cited documents, and it ended with a quote from Gerald Hammond. I was a teacher for 38 years. I taught kids that if they saw something wrong, they should speak up. And when the moment came for me to do what I taught, I did it from my seat. I didn't stand up. I didn't get between that woman and that child. And every day for the rest of my life, I will wonder whether I could have stopped her if I had just stood up 3 seconds sooner. The article was read by 4 million people in its first 6 hours. By 2 p.m. Pacific, 3 additional airline employees had come forward to federal investigators with information about the company's culture of complaint suppression. One of them was a senior HR manager who had overseen the closure of 26 discrimination cases over 5 years. She said she was instructed by her director to resolve complaints internally and to avoid findings that could create legal exposure. She brought documentation. At 3 p.m., the Department of Transportation announced a formal rulemaking process to establish new federal standards for airline crew conduct, unaccompanied minor protocols, and passenger complaint transparency. The announcement cited the Elijah Carter incident as the catalyst. It was the fastest regulatory response to an aviation civil rights case in 30 years. At 3:30 p.m., the airline's board of directors announced the creation of an independent civil rights review commission to be led by a former federal judge and staffed by outside investigators. The commission would have full access to company records, personnel files, and operational systems. Its findings would be made public. Arthur Redmond called Jeremiah personally to inform him. Jeremiah, I want you to know that this commission is real. It has teeth, it has independence, and it has my full support. Arthur, I appreciate that, but a commission means nothing if the people who enabled this culture remain in positions of influence. You have directors on your board who have been there through a decade of buried complaints. If the commission is real, it needs to be able to recommend structural changes, not suggestions, changes. I understand. Do you? Because 3 days ago, your airline held my son in a room and tried to erase him. I need more than understanding, Arthur. I need accountability. You'll have it. We'll see. 4 p.m. Pacific. Jeremiah, Ruth, and Elijah left the hotel for the airport, not LAX. They flew private out of Van Nuys. Jeremiah had considered making a point by flying commercial, but Ruth shut that down immediately. You are not putting that child back on a commercial airplane 3 days after a woman hit him on one. He can make a point when he's grown. Right now, he needs to go home. They boarded the private jet at 4:15 p.m. Ruth sat across from Elijah. She pulled a worn Bible from her bag and opened it to a page she had already marked. You know the story of Elijah? The real Elijah? The prophet. That's right. You know what happened to him? He fought the false prophets. He did more than fight them. He stood alone on a mountain. Every single person in power said he was wrong. Every single voice said he should sit down and be quiet. And he didn't. He stood there by himself and he called down the truth. And the truth came. Not because he was loud, not because he was powerful, because he refused to be silent. She closed the Bible. You stood on your mountain yesterday, baby, and the truth came. Elijah looked out the window. Grandma, do you think it'll change anything? For real? It already has. You can't undo what the world saw. You can't unplay that recording. You can't unpublish that story. Every airline in this country is looking at what happened and asking themselves if they're next. That's not nothing. That's the beginning of something. But what about the next kid? The one who doesn't have a recording? The one whose dad isn't? Who doesn't have what we have? Ruth reached across and took his hand. That's exactly the right question. And the fact that you're asking it at 12 years old tells me you already know the answer. What's the answer? The answer is that you keep going. You use your voice, you use your name, you use everything God gave you to make sure that the next child who sits in a seat they earned doesn't have to fight to stay in it. The plane took off. Los Angeles fell away beneath them. 8 p.m. Eastern, they landed in New York. Jeremiah had arranged for a car to take them to the apartment in Manhattan. Elijah fell asleep in the back seat with his head on Ruth's shoulder. She didn't move for the entire ride. She sat perfectly still and let her grandson sleep against her the way she had let his father sleep against her 30 years ago, when the world was different, but also exactly the same. When they arrived, Jeremiah carried Elijah inside. The boy woke up halfway to the bedroom and said, "I can walk, Dad." "I know you can. Let me carry you anyway." Elijah closed his eyes and let his father carry him. He was 12 years old, and he was too old to be carried, and he didn't care. Jeremiah put him in bed, pulled the blanket up, sat on the edge. "Dad." "Yeah?" "At the press conference, when I talked, I saw people crying, reporters, grown-ups. They were crying." "They were." "Why?" "Because they heard themselves in that story. Every person who ever stayed silent when they should have spoken. Every parent who imagined their child in that seat. Every human being who knows that what happened to you happens every single day to people who have no cameras, no recordings, no press conferences. They cried because the truth hurts, and because sometimes hearing it out loud is the only thing that makes people feel it. Did you cry? Not in front of the cameras. But after? Jeremiah looked at his hands. Yes, me too. That's okay. I know. Elijah pulled the blanket up to his chin. Dad, one more thing. Anything. I'm not scared anymore. I was, in that room. I was really scared. But I'm not anymore. And I don't think I will be again. Not the same way. Because now I know something I didn't know before. What's that? I know that people lie. I know that systems lie. I know that people in power will look at the truth and choose the lie because the lie is easier. But I also know that if you hold on to the truth long enough, it wins. It doesn't win fast, it doesn't win easy, but it wins. And that's enough. Jeremiah put his hand on his son's head. He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded. Good night, Dad. Good night, Elijah. He turned off the light and walked out. Ruth was in the hallway. She had heard everything. She didn't say a word. She just put her hand on her son's chest, right over his heart, and held it there. Over the next 6 months, the world caught up to what happened in Seat 1A. Karen Mellick was charged with misdemeanor assault and battery. She pleaded no contest and was sentenced to community service, a fine, and mandatory bias training. She lost her FAA certification. She never flew again. Stephen Aldrich was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to tamper with evidence. His case went to federal court. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and received 18 months of probation. His name became a case study in corporate accountability failures, cited in 3 separate law school textbooks within a year. Patricia Hayward cooperated fully with federal investigators. Her testimony helped expose the airline's internal culture of complaint suppression. She was not charged, but she never returned to the aviation industry. In an interview she gave 18 months later, she said, "I looked at a child who was telling the truth, and I chose to protect a company that was lying. I will never understand how I became that person, and I will spend the rest of my career making sure I never am again." The airline paid a $44 million settlement to the Department of Justice. It implemented new crew conduct standards, independent complaint review processes, and mandatory de-escalation training. The Civil Rights Review Commission issued its findings 10 months after Elijah's flight. The report was 200 pages long. It documented systemic failures spanning more than a decade. David Park, the flight attendant who froze, resigned voluntarily. He wrote a public letter that was published in a national newspaper. It said, in part, "I watched a colleague assault a child, and I did nothing. I told myself I was afraid, but the truth is, I was comfortable, and my comfort was worth more to me in that moment than a 12-year-old boy's safety. I cannot undo that choice, but I can make sure I never make it again." He went back to school to study social work. He graduated 2 years later. Victor Ruiz wrote the letter Jeremiah asked him to write. Elijah read it alone in his room. He never shared what it said. But the next time a reporter asked him whether he had forgiven the people involved, Elijah said, "Forgiveness isn't my job. Accountability is. They know what they did. What they do next is between them and their conscience." Gerald Hammond became an advocate for passenger rights. He testified before Congress at the age of 68, wearing the same suit he wore on Flight 2214. His daughter Angela's article won a National Journalism Award. And Jeremiah Carter established the Elijah Carter Foundation, dedicated to providing legal resources, advocacy, and recording technology to families and children who experience discrimination in public spaces and have no platform to fight back. In its first year, the foundation handled over 300 cases across 26 states. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, Elijah stood at a lectern in Washington, D.C. He was 13 now, taller. The bruise was long gone, but the memory of it lived in his posture, the way he stood, the way he held his shoulders, the way he looked directly at anyone who spoke to him without flinching. He spoke